I can't trust my kids though, because, they'll walk past half naked or itching their nuts or something like that. You know what I mean? Not even 2 seconds later, it was as if I just started falling backwards into this pool and slowly floating down into this darkness. And it was pitch black, and it was this complete abyss. And it was like a vault that I knew that, traveled forever, and it was endless. And, as I was falling slowly down, I realized oh my gosh, this, what's going on? Am I dying? What's happening? These people were interchanging. And as fast as you could see these interactions, I was noticing a pattern. And it was someone was coming to me in their life for some sort of direction, some sort of the next puzzle piece to their destiny. And instead of me being true to who I was in God's eyes and my identity and being a Christian and being the soldier of light and this person to steer people towards God and towards the light, because of my own hurt and pain, I steered them into a life of destruction, and they all died because of me. Go of control. How do I allow God to form my identity and form my path and my purpose? And when you put your own thoughts into what you think you should do or where you think you should go and how you should act. And I think, unfortunately, a lot of religion and religious institutions really force that, There's a way that if you let go of control, every time you let something go, God's going to give you something to replace that.
Thank you for joining us. I'm so glad you're here today. And I am really excited for our guest. Now, it kind of dawned on me when I was getting ready to introduce her that I was going to tell you guys how excited I was. But what if, for all the podcasts and shows that we all listen to, somebody went, yeah, I'm really not excited about my guest today. I mean, we're always super excited about our guests, but for those of you who have been following along, you know that part of my heart is just these women that I encounter in the course of my life. Over the course of 47 years, it has been one of my greatest joys is to take all of the days and all the crazy things that I do and just get introduced to new people. I love, love, love people. So my guest today, she and I met when we both signed up recently. She's been involved in it. I just recently signed up for a Christian women's business forum. And it's all remote because people who are a part of this are nationwide. And so when I was across the screen listening to her, I went, I love her. I got to know more about her story. And I really, really, really just love being connected to people who have been through, as you guys know, an awful lot, many of us have, right? And so we come up through different ranks, we come up through different experiences, and eventually we hit a crossroads in our lives. And oftentimes it takes us down the path of what do we do with those experiences in relationship to God? So that's where we're going today. And I am joined by my very new friend, Miss Gwendolyn Bork. And I know people call you Gwenny, right? On our Zooms that we have. And I don't know Gwenny well enough to call her Gwenny, but I think by the end of this, I might. So do you actually go by Gwen? Do people call you Gwen? I should probably know this. Or Gwendolyn? Which?
A lot of people like Gwen, but I introduced myself as Gwendolyn, yes.
Okay, Gwendolyn. Okay, so we'll be formal for the next 5 minutes. So Gwendolyn has just this incredible journey. I can't wait to have her share a little bit more, but in the way of just a brief introduction, over 20 years in business development, consulting, team management, all the things that right away resonated with me from a business perspective. And she's involved with wealth management and right now just has a huge penchant, I think you probably always have, for community development, for making a difference in the world, for saying, I need to right these wrongs. I want to leave a legacy. I want people in my community to know that they have value and worth and meaning. And I know you and I both have really big hearts for teenagers and people who are just kind of coming up into the world and going, what do I do with my life? And how can I leave a legacy? So Gwendolyn, it's so funny. I don't really know how to call you Gwendolyn. To me, you're just like Gwen. Gwenny, but it has also been involved. I don't know if you still are, because again, this is fairly new to us, but I saw when I pulled your bio, president of an addiction prevention coalition. I also know that you are CEO of QCC, which is Queen City Collaborative. I want you to talk a little bit more about that in a minute. But really has been through an awful lot. The other thing I didn't know as I was stalking you for this bio is that you are also an author, and you share a lot in your story called, which I enjoyed, Walking the Fine Line. So that probably wasn't a great introduction because you're all over the place with your experiences, and I don't know how to box you in, which is great because you can't be boxed in. So welcome. Thank you for being here with us today. I am really, really excited you said yes. You're here.
Aw, thanks, Bob.
Yeah.
You can call me Gwenny as much as you want.
Gwenny. I loved it. Well, that's what I heard. Our group leader was calling you Gwenny. I'm like, I want to call her Gwenny. I don't maybe know her first, but I feel like I know her longer. So, and the 2 or 3 times that we have
it was a pleasure to get to know you during Pinnacle.
Thank you. I think we have our hearts, like our hearts are just aligned. And so one of the things that really resonated with me about you is that you just speak your mind. Like you are this is how I'm thinking, this is what I'm feeling, and this is how I feel about God. And it's in your face, and it is direct, and it really is captivating to me because I often speak like that too, but most of my life I was kind of chastised for it. So can you maybe start out with our viewers and listeners and just talk a little bit about your upbringing, and if you ever felt sort of ridiculed for your big, bold personality, and if you ever sort of became inauthentic as part of that to hide who God really made you to be, and just a bit about that experience, and then we'll just kind of go from there.
That's a big question.
I know.
So I was always an outspoken individual, very opinionated, very independent. I always ask a lot of questions, and I was raised by a single father. I was the youngest of 3 siblings who was a captain in the Army and later became a sheriff in law enforcement for over 30 years, where he died in active duty a couple of years ago. So, yeah, to say the least, we lived in a very regimented household, and we all had responsibilities, and the whole future of our household, hung on whether or not we upheld our individual duties. So questioning authority or questioning and asking questions wasn't really necessarily, it wasn't necessarily nurtured. So we'll say that much. So yeah, I was more or less chastised in a way for asking questions, and wondering why things were the way that they were, or why they had to be the way that they were. And, back in that day, if you did something wrong, you would have to write, typically 500 times, I will not lie, or, do this. My dad realized I had a gift to write. So instead of, every time I did something wrong, he said, tell me, write a story about the girl who forgot to give the dog water, the girl who asked too many questions. And the one day that he asked that, he told me to write that. It was a 2,000-word essay. And that was really the beginning of probably my greatest writing career, because although I was supposed to invalidate why I ask too many questions, in my heart I validated the inquisitive person that I really was. So to say the least, it led to a conflict of interest in the way that I was being raised and the way that I wanted to be. So I left home when I was 15 and embarked on a world that I thought would be better than the world that I was in. And unfortunately, I was tragically wrong.
Wow. Okay. So I didn't know that part of your journey either. So you're saying you're youngest of 3. Do you have 2 older brothers or a sister? Brothers. Are you the only
brother that's the oldest, and my sister's in the middle. So my brother's 4 years older.
Okay. So you left when you were 15. Just you're like, I'm out. I'm rolling. I'm going. And how did your dad respond?
I kind of bounced back and forth between my mom and my dad for a couple of years before I actually left. But he didn't do anything. He was a hard line. This is this is who I am. This is what I expect. And you're going to fall in line. And if you don't want to, then, good luck. And I disappeared. So I disappeared for 3 years until they saw me again in the emergency room at the I was 18.
Okay. I want to come back to the emergency room at 18 because I want to just talk for one quick second about when you said that you were not really encouraged, right, to ask questions because it's this way, because you lived in this regimented sort of militant almost, right, very authoritative household. Did you get raised? Were you also raised in a religious tradition? Like, did you guys go to church?
Oh, my mom was a organist in a church when we were real young before they separated. And in the midst of their trials and tribulations, my dad would read us like Proverbs. So we grew up Christian. So I did have that influence for sure. And God was a big piece of my life and who I turned to and really would talk to for peace and security and love and understanding when I was going through, the hard times of my adolescence.
And so when you did that and you turned to God, would you say now in retrospect that you talked to God in a way that was also very sort of submissive, or did you feel free to ask God questions? Because, a lot of times we take our earthly relationships into our relationship with God and we sort of interact in the same capacity or the same way. So were you afraid to ask God questions, or was it very freeing and maybe had the opposite effect?
Honestly, it had the opposite effect. Good. Yeah, it was this, place where a free space that I could feel like I could, judgment-free zone, just asking whatever questions I had on my mind. And it led to really metaphorical pieces in my writings and my journals that I wrote like nonstop for a good 10 years, which awesome. Led to that book, Walking the Fine Line. But yeah.
That's awesome. Okay. So you said you left when you were 15. They didn't see you for about 3 years until they saw you in an emergency room. Okay. That's obviously a big story. And honestly, I don't know it. So will you share with us what happened, like the whole journey from 15 to 18, and then how did you land up in an emergency room?
So I lost my way, talking about that, when you did your introduction and, those times where you think you did something that is too bad and too harsh, that you couldn't turn back to God. I had been tampered and bruised and broken in so many ways between being, abused and raped and just so much had happened to me. I took that on as myself and felt unworthy. And it led to really me losing my faith. And that was where, I had no connection to God anymore, that I felt like he deserted me and left me, to the world's devices to just take me and abuse me and, do all this stuff to me. So when I lost my way, it was really only 3 months. It was April of my senior year that I gave up. And I said, that's it. I'm checking out. I'm done. There is no God. And I rebuked God, which was a very big mistake. But it was part of my journey. And in the process, not even 3 months later, I was holding on to dear life. So what had happened is, what I remember is I was in an ambulance, I believe. And so I was in the ambulance. There felt like there was 3 people around me, and it was like close quarters, and they were looking in my eyes, but I couldn't see them. So it was as if my eyelids were closed, people were looking at me. So it was bright. I could sense 3 people. They were frantic, saying, "Get over here. Why are eyes so dilated?" And I'm in my head, like, hearing and wondering, like, what's going on. And then not even 2 seconds later, it was as if I just started falling backwards into this pool and slowly floating down into this darkness. And it was pitch black, and it was this complete abyss, and it was like a vault that I knew that, traveled forever, and it was endless. And, as I was falling slowly down, I realized like, oh my gosh, like this, what's going on? Am I dying? Like what's happening? And, I sensed that there was something bad in the darkness, and they knew, they knew that I was there, and they were coming to get me. And so by the time I got to the bottom of this, I realized, oh my gosh, this is it. I'm dead. Like I'm totally dead. And I started being like frantic, like, no, this can't be it. Like I can't, this can't be it. And I started seeing in front of me like a picture of all, like I was standing on the right side, and on the left side, these people were interchanging. And as fast as you could see these interactions, I was noticing a pattern. And it was someone was coming to me in their life for some sort of direction, some sort of like the next puzzle piece to their destiny. And instead of me being true to who I was in God's eyes and my identity, and being a Christian and being this soldier of light and this person to steer people towards God and towards the light, because of my own hurt and pain, I steered them into a life of destruction, and they all died because of me. So instinctively, I saw hundreds of people that I'd met, sometimes for 2 seconds, 2 minutes at a gas station, a year, and their blood was like starting to like drip from my fingertips to my elbows. And it absolutely like broke my heart that I rejected the very creator that I knew was my father, that gave me life, that was there my whole life, that I rejected my purpose, my identity, and that all those people's lives were at stake. And like talk about in the Bible, like weeping and gnashing of teeth, where you feel like you're having a heart attack. I felt my heart breaking from the inside out. And like the gnashing of teeth is where like you grit your teeth and you're just like, it hurts so bad. Like you grind your teeth because there's nothing you could do. That's where I was. And I had no other choice, because there was no way that I wasn't strong enough to deal with that pain, to see that movie reel over and over and over again, which I felt instinctively would have led throughout all of eternity. That I was like, God, please help me. And I did the only thing that I thought I could do. And in that moment, this light turned on from way up above me, like the spotlight. And it just like created a cone of light, like a spotlight right next to me. And I stepped right into the spotlight. And the minute that I did, and it was just big enough to cover me, like just enough to cover like what would have been my body. And it was like the minute that I went in there, it was pure love, like pure peace, security, comfort. And that's when he talked to me.
Okay. I'm wow. I'm wowing right now. So this is a near-death experience. This is what you're explaining right now. So you were in the ambulance as this whole thing happened, but your vision was exactly like you just got done.
That was my.
So you felt.
Yeah,
it was.
That was my last real memory.
Wow. So you said God spoke to you audibly. You could hear His words. And.
Yeah. So basically, he was like, Gwen. And he said my name. And he said Gwen. Huh?
Not Gwendolyn.
Just remember, that's a good one. You're talking about what people call me.
Yeah.
I know.
God calls you
like, Gwen. Okay. What are you doing? Why did you? Yeah. Gwen, what are you doing? Why did you do this to yourself? You knew you were there for a reason. Now you have to go through the physical pain in order to get back to where you're supposed to. So he wasn't telling me anything new. I was like, you're right. And then he showed me real quick, because I said, oh, physical pain, I can do physical pain. It was all emotional up until that point, when I was 18. So he showed me real quick, 2 quick flashes of a red ball of metal, which was my car. And I had a red little Ford Escort, and the shape was indistinguishable. You couldn't see the front from the back. The windows were smashed. It was a red ball of metal. And I saw that, and it's like so quick, but I was like, oh my gosh, I don't know. That looks bad. Like, I don't know if I could do that. And he's like, no, you can do it. I'm like, no, I can't do that. I can't do that. I'm like, I don't want to go back. Like, I just want to stay with you. And he's like, no, Gwen. He's like, you have to go back. And in that moment, it was as if I opened up my eyes. So when you stopped talking to me and you showed me those glimpses of my car, I opened up my eyes and, this far, 4 inches from my nose is all the way around me, encircling me as deep. That spotlight had vanished into the darkness were these not good beings, like evil beings that were half human, not necessarily human, like demons. Like the way that almost like movies describe it is what I saw. Like they were lurched at my face. They were salivating at their mouth, lunging forward. They wanted me so bad, but they could not touch me as long as I was in the light. And then it was like right at that moment, like a balloon, he just like let go of me and God set me free. And I slowly went back to the surface, and it was right then that real life began. I woke up, I was in the ICU, I was getting wheeled into surgery. And as I was moving, I hear something on my right-hand side in my right ear. And it was my mom. And she's like, Gwen, you've been in a really bad car accident. She's like, you gotta be strong. Okay. You just gotta be strong. You've been in a bad car accident. And the minute she said that, I was like, oh, okay. So that was real. And what God showed me was real. And here we go. Like, this is it. And not even 2 seconds later, I'm stationary in the operating room at the ICU. I hear my dad's voice, and I couldn't see. And I'll tell you why after you hear all these injuries, but I heard my dad, and my dad goes, Gwen, I'm going to tell you right now. He's like, you need to fight. He's like, because if you don't fight, you are not going to make it. And here's the captain of the military. My dad could have chopped his arm off, and he would have been like, don't worry about me. Keep walking. He could have said the same thing to us. Like, so for him to say, fight harder than I've ever fought before, you're not going to make it. Like, I knew in that moment that this was serious, and it was true that if I didn't fight, I wasn't going to make it. And I barely survived. For 2 weeks I was in ICU, and my whole body was destroyed. My nose was filleted wide open. They had called in surgeons for that. My wrist and my hand were broken in 18 spots. They had to put 8 screws through my wrist and my hand. I broke 2 of my left ribs that punctured my left lung. I broke off a bunch of bones off of my right ankle, and then they ended up gutting me wide open. They called doctors from all over New York to come to my bedside, and day after day did 12, 16-hour surgeries to save my life. They took my spleen out. They took my gallbladder out, a section of my large intestines. Like, I didn't leave over a month and a half of being in the hospital walking. I left in a wheelchair.
Wow. I'm supposed to have something to say to all this, and I'm taking all of this in, and I am speechless. Like, literally, what you know is hard to do with me. I don't have enough words. I have all these thoughts, and where my head goes is so many places, but first and foremost to probably the most often asked question of you when you share this story, which is, did it immediately change your relationship with God? Like, when you got out of the hospital, out of ICU, were you just like, Saul on the road to Damascus? Were you like, okay, the scales are off my eyes. I get it, God. I'm going to lead this, charge. I'm going to write all the books of the New Testament. Were you immediately changed on your way out of the hospital? How did you transform coming out on the other side of that? What did that look like?
Ooh. So I went into a very major, dark, deep depression. I was independent since I was 15. I worked in the music industry. I set up for national bands that were coming into Buffalo. I had the best job in the world. I was making a lot of money. I had my own condo, and I was a senior in high school. Like, I was doing really, really well, and I lost it all. I had people washing my hair. My brother took me in. I had him carrying me down the stairs every morning and putting me in a wheelchair. I had to take care of myself. I had people washing my hair, like I said, washing my body, my brother's girlfriend that he married to now. But I was basically completely their ego. I was humiliated and humbled. And it took me a while in getting out of my depression to even want to talk to God again, because I got mad. Like, you took me and you brought me back to life for this. I lost my friends. I lost my so-called friends, I should say. Anybody and everybody that I built my life around and vanished. Like nobody existed anymore. So it took probably about 6 months before I met someone who was a Christian that basically told me that, you know, you need Jesus. And I'm like, no, I don't. I know God. And he goes, no, you need Jesus. And I'm like, but I got a direct line because darkness. And to make a long story short, after a lot of fighting, it took until probably the end of, you know, that year. So the accident happened in June. And the end of that year, I ended up getting born again after a lot of darkness and I believe a lot of spiritual warfare. I mean, I saw things I shouldn't have seen, and the devil became just as real to me, and I needed protection. And it was in the midst of those really dark spiritual wars that I called a show called Ask the Pastor, saying, I need spiritual protection. I feel vulnerable. Like something's coming to get me. And they're like, do you have Jesus? And I said, no. And they're like, well, you need to get born again. So I got off the phone. I did the deed, and instantly I felt finally what I felt when I was in that spotlight when I died. Like I finally found the light again. I found the love and the peace and the comfort, everything that I felt when I died in that spotlight, in that light, I felt again for the first time when I asked to be born again.
Wow, Gwen. Okay, so, you know, you're honestly, in my whole journey, you're the first person I've ever known. You know, I've read the Mitch Albom books, but you're the first person that I've actually ever known who's gone through this, that is here today and can give testimony, be a witness, say, this is exactly what I saw, and explain how you came. And I love the part where you say, no, I wasn't instantly changed. I was mad. I was mad at God. I'm like, really? You saved me for this? Like, I'm angry and I'm raw and I'm not instantly like magically fixed. You know, before I actually learned to read the Bible, I was reading this whole story about Paul, and I was like, okay, so he's on the road to Damascus. Jesus like tells him, what is up? Why are you persecuting my people? And then you flip the page and you think it's like the next day and the dude is transformed. No, it was like 17 years. I mean, you know, we're living obviously a very spiritual existence in a human condition. And because we are spiritual beings, right? Clearly, you know that better than anybody. And so we apply our timelines to things, and we're supposed to be like, oh, were you instantly changed? You know, I got not even close to what you went through, but when I was trapped in the hospital for 35 days, undergoing a bone marrow transplant, and I'm like, I'm not supposed to live. I was the only person that walked out alive, and I'm in the parking lot, and people are coming at me. I haven't even driven away from the place in 35 days, and people are like, are you super close to God now? And I'm like, I just want to go home. I just want to go to the bathroom and not have everything measured. I just want to go to the dry cleaner. I just want to go. I want to be left alone. I want a second to process. But then I felt guilty for saying that because I'm supposed to be a certain way. And I guess my follow-up question to you is for people that have not gone through something like that, but yet, you know, are very, very spiritually inclined and do have a relationship with Jesus and understand what we understand, but they haven't gone through a near-death experience or something similar. Like a life event. What would you say to people that go, I don't have that kind of thing. And how do I get it? Or how do I become close to Jesus, having not gone through something so phenomenally huge? What would you say to them?
It's a good question. I can only offer what I've done in my own life. And yeah, that started the process, the accident, but that didn't do the work. You know, the work was recreating my identity the way that the Lord saw me. So I had to strip my past, what did people have done to me, who they called me, how they developed me, and how the world had developed me. I had to strip that off one by one and really let God define who I was. And it took me, you know, number one, getting born again, being able to read the Bible with the influence of the Holy Spirit to relay the messages that were meant for me all those times that I was looking for answers. I mean, that's number one. Number two is letting go of control, you know, like the process that started after my car accident. Some of the spiritualists call it the dark night of the soul, right? I mean, that's what I went through. It was how do I let go of control? How do I allow God to form my identity and form my path and my purpose. And when you put your own thoughts into what you think you should do or where you think you should go and how you should act. And I think, unfortunately, a lot of religious institutions really force that. There's a way that if you let go of control, every time you let something go, God's going to give you something to replace that. Because just like you're given your house, God gave it to you. If it's gone, he took it away. It's time to get something else. Like if you let go of your job, he's the one that gave it to you. He's going to give you something better. Like you with your health, you went through that. Like you went through that having to release the control of your life. Like what could have happened to you in that moment and in those days of transplant? You could have been gone. You had to give control of your life. So my suggestion would be anything that you think you have a handle on, just let it go. You have to let go of control, and incrementally, step by step, God replaces that with dependence on him. That's how you get close to him, by fully depending on him for everything.
That's it. Thank you. That is the best answer. And it's the true answer. And it's been interesting why I'm drawn to people like you, right? Who have big personalities, who want to go change the world, who are doing amazing things, who show up every day. That is hard to let go of control for people who are doers. And who have been hurt. Self-preservation for me was to say, okay, here's my to-do list. I'm going to jam 23 hours into this day right now. I might sleep for an hour, but I'm going to get all this stuff done so that I feel comfortable, so that I feel safe, so that I feel in control. And God is like, no, because when I did that, did I get worldly things accomplished? Yep, sure. Did I work hard? Did I get close sales? Did I do all these things? Yes, but I did them and never depended on God for them. And what's so interesting is right now, it's like 7:00 at night, 8:00 at night. Okay. And I told somebody the other day, I'm doing this and I'm talking to these amazing people, and the people keep coming into my life. And I'm so grateful and blessed. And Life Network for Women is showing this. And I'm like, here's the thing. In my former job, I had so much more time and I wasn't doing these things. And now I can't even see straight. And God is bringing these things at me because, it's him doing it. Because now I am sitting here going, this has nothing to do with me. And so when he forms us, when he makes us to be who he created us to be, like your gift of writing and your gift of why you're still here, what you're putting out into the world, those are all his plans, all God's plans. So we think we're going to make our plans because, these are my genius ideas, and no idea I've ever had has been a good one. I mean, sometimes, but if it's for somebody else, if I'm helping somebody, if I'm uplifting somebody, if I'm moving somebody to Jesus, those are great ideas. But if I have this idea, like I'm just going to go knock it out of the park and I, selfish, ego. Nope. He's like, yeah, chill out. Have a timeout for about 35 days in a bone marrow transplant while you figure this out. I'm like, okay. It's so hard, but it's the best lesson to learn.
That's so true.
I've never been more joyful. And I can see it on your face. When I met you recently, I'm like, this woman is filled with peace and joy. But what I always tell people is never to judge people, because had I not known this backstory you're sharing with us right now, I would have had no idea. I would have seen some really kick butt, opinionated, smart, wickedly funny woman, right? Who I'm like, man, she's got it made. And I would have had no insight into how you got to be here today and who you are. And when we get off the track of our identity, that is the most gut-wrenching. I think that's probably one of the greatest sources of depression for all of us, is because we know we're not who we could be, who we're supposed to be, who God wants us to be. We're defying that. And we're beautiful creatures, like each of us, our uniqueness and our value and our mattering and our worth. And when we try and run from that, God's like, this is the greatest gift I've ever given you. Be in it, lean into it, So I am astounded at your story. Like literally, you didn't lead with that, sister, a couple weeks ago. You could have been like, hey, I got something to tell you. It's amazing. And I just thank you.
Well, I love how you're 100% right. God, when he led his people out of Egypt and that slavery, like they were still, you couldn't take the Egypt out of the people, right? Like they still wanted like the good food and the pomegranates and like they wanted, the comforts of that life. And God gave, Moses he led them, he got Moses all the way to the Jordan River. And he was like, man, you were good. Joshua's got an edge on you, man. Like he's going to take the ones across the river. And like he told Joshua, he's like, all right, dude, I'm going to give you like step by step by step, but I'm not going to give you like 20 steps all at once. I'm going to tell you, go get your people, bring them to the banks. We're going to have a little song. We're going to do a little song, for every tribe of every Israelite. And we're going to tell these people as a reminder where they came from. And it's like, he gave them one step at a time. And I think that is like, and it shows over and over and over again, like if we just are faithful for that one step in that one moment, because if he gave us all the steps up front, I think our ego would still take over and be like, oh, I did that. That was all me. Yeah, he wrote down the steps, but I did the steps. Okay. So the whole goal, I think, is God is just always showing us one step at a time. You faithful with that? I'll give you the next one up. You faithful with that? I'll give you the next one up. And he's continuously showed that to me over and over again. Like you had mentioned earlier, some of the questions that you normally ask people. And like, I would say the hardest thing for me to ever let go that I had squeezed in my hands, and I had to let go of possibly losing my house after losing my job of 10 years after the '08 recession and the stock market crash. And I've already almost lost my life, like there's so many things that I lost, but the hardest thing for me to let go was my kids. Like I was in the middle of a crazy custody battle. My oldest son, his dad died in a car accident when he was 3 months old. So at any time I could have lost both of my kids to completely irrelevant accusations that held no warrant against who I was as a mother. And I had to let go of control of those two kids' destiny. And I fell down. I had no lawyer to represent myself. I fell down on my knees one day after months of going back and forth to court, the only beings that I loved more than anything in the world. And I was like, you know what, God, you gave these kids to me. I have to trust you with these kids. And I gave up full parental rights to God. And I was like, if I lose them, I have to trust that you are still their dad. You will always be their father. And no matter what, you're going to form them. You're going to be there for them. And I have to trust you with that. And it's still hard to this day, but I'm so glad I was able to do that because I think it's hard for a lot of parents to give up control of their kids' destinies, and trusting God with that one.
Yeah. And it's a double-edged sword because you feel like, well, I'm responsible for this human. And so therefore I want to pour into them. But the best parenting is the parenting that equips them for the world and for a relationship with God and goes, okay, my work here is done. God gave us our kids for a certain period of time. And the rest, it's like God parents us, right? Like I'm going to give you the first one. I'll hold the son for Ai or whatever, the Old Testament. And then I'll get the first one. I'll hold the son. And then from then on, you're on your own. Like I'm giving you the formula, like, so that you can understand you're doing this and you have choices to make and everything is a choice. And so I remember Olivia, my daughter, said to me when she was really young, Mom, if God can do all things, why can't he just like tell us and make us love him? And then, in her mind, she's like, case closed. If he can do everything, why can't he just like do that? And then we're good here. We don't have to pray. And I said, well, honey, would that be real? Like if I said to you, I'm your mom, so I'm going to make you love me. Would I really know that you're choosing that? Or how would I know that your feelings are legit? And she's like, yeah, that makes sense. And I said, because it's this long relationship. I said, I adore you more than any human on the planet. When she was like 4, at almost 24, it's unfathomable how much I love that girl. Now, after all those years of teenagers, that I know you're going through right now with your boys, I like wanted to wring her neck. I'm like, why are you not listening to me? I'm giving you these rules, not because I'm trying to rain down authority or take control, but because it's so you don't get hurt. It's so that you can still show up and be who you are. And so that you can, I want what's best for you, but trust me, because I can see where this is going to lead you. And then all of a sudden it hit me one day, like, well, this is the story of God. So if God is our father, he's not trying to be some jerk from the high heavens sitting down, raining down authority. He's trying to be like, look, make your decisions and make good ones, because I'm right here next to you and I'm not leaving you. I'm not forsaking you. I'm going to love you anyway, even though you're a total pain in the, like, pay attention here, like TikTok, but we're not on a schedule. We all come to realize at different points in our life. Right. So.
And like, I don't want people, like, you make so many good points about the whole timing of things. Like, it takes time, to release these things hidden in the dark and trust God to make it right within you, like to take those steps of faith. And it took me, that happened when I was 18, that car accident. I went through this hard process of first finding out who I was and then what did God really want me to do. And I went step by step, many steps, like, it's like, what about Bob? Like, many steps to here, step to, like I took many steps to get to where I'm at. You figure 20 years later, I'm going to be 41 in like 2 weeks. And I have fulfilled so many little small works of faith that have led to, it started with speaking, writing a book, and then, taking that book of all my lessons learned and going and speaking on stage, and then people like relating to that and people wanting one-on-one time and trying to understand how they could get to healing and they could get to a Christian life coach. And then I started a non-for-profit in addiction recovery, and then it led to, working in addiction prevention. And I'm the president of that organization now and trying to help the next generation. So I'm like full circle back to trying to support the Gwens that never got the support that they needed, and being the female leader and woman that could be there for other girls and young kids that need that encouragement. Like, hey, you don't have to stay here. There's purpose for you. Trust me. You might not know what it is right now, but you're going to fight for the 10 hardest years of your life right now, ages 14 to 24, which were like those 10 years in my book that I published. Like, just fight for your life. You make it through that smoke. You're going to find who you are. I promise you. And there's a whole life and a purpose that is beyond what you could even imagine. Just keep fighting and don't give up.
And on that note, yes, I think that's it. That's every single thing that, it's the reason we're here. It's the reason we're here is to accept who we are. And again, we might not know, like you said, and so many of us put all these heavy expectations on ourselves, or if we have friends or people in our life that they feel super confident and secure and they've been through it and they know who they are and we're not. We live in this comparison society. So therefore we feel lesser than, we feel like we're failing at something. No. Just don't give up. And to your point, do the very next right thing in faith, and it builds. And then God gives us those things so that we understand we can do it. And then our faith gets stronger. It's a muscle, gets stronger and stronger and stronger and more dependent. And then we let go of control and then we're good. Like there's nothing that will stress us, give us anxiety, make us make bad decisions in the same way ever again. Once you get to that point, doesn't mean bad things don't happen. Doesn't mean stress in life doesn't happen. It just means that through those things, we're good. We're just good. And we've got good people that will show up on the course of our journey and remind us of that. So I am so glad that you're one of those people for me.
Hey.
Yeah. So I'm not
it's a pleasure. It's been, like you said, it's a hard road, but like we can't be afraid of trials and tribulations because it's perseverance that, leads us to hope and love, and it endures all things. And that's what points us to God. So can't be scared of hard times. We just have to be quick to give that faith up to God. That's it. It's that simple.